Hi everybody, my name is Elizabeth and I'm a librarian here at the LSC Tomball Community Library. Welcome back to Baking is Baking, the series where we're not always baking anything, but where we are always talking about food. Have you ever heard the phrase Renaissance man or Renaissance woman? It refers to people who we might otherwise call polymaths, or people who are proficient in a wide range of fields or studies. And this term was actually coined in the 20th century to refer to the great thinkers of the Renaissance, the period between the 14th and 17th centuries in Europe. People like Leonardo da Vinci, who we now primarily think of as being the painter behind the Mona Lisa, but who also did a lot of other stuff, including being an engineer, an inventor, a sculptor, and a philosopher. Although there were certainly other people like Da Vinci living and working during the Renaissance, there were also Renaissance men and Renaissance women living well before and well after the Renaissance, including my personal favorite Renaissance person, Hildegard von Bingen, also known as Saint Hildegard, who lived in Germany in the 12th century, well before the Renaissance. Like Da Vinci, Hildegard did a lot of stuff in her life, including being a mystic, a teacher, a philosopher, a linguist, a scientist, and the most well-recorded composer of vocal chant in the entire Middle Ages. Hildegard was a very busy lady, and she got up to a whole lot in her surprisingly long life. She died at the age of 81 in the year 1179, which is pretty impressive when you consider the fact that the average age of mortality in Europe at the time was only 33. During that time, Hildegard became one of the most accomplished figures of the European Middle Ages, not just for women, but for people generally speaking. So join me today as we talk about one of my very favorite historical figures, Hildegard von Bingen, her life, her work, and one very tasty recipe that is credited to her, because on top of everything else she was doing, Hildegard had a lot of opinions about food. So, let's get started. Hildegard was born sometime around the year 1098 in the county of Sponheim, which was at the time part of the Holy Roman Empire, but now is part of Germany. According to her hagiography, or her saint's biography, Hildegard was a frail, sickly child, and she claimed to receive prophetic visions from a very young age. Now, there were a lot of mystics in the Middle Ages, in both Christian countries as well as Islamic ones, but Hildegard's visions were pretty unique. Many mystics at the time claimed to go into an ecstatic fit or trance, but Hildegard claimed that she was completely lucid and aware when she received her visions, which allowed her to recount them to others with incredible detail and clarity. Initially, Hildegard didn't write or talk about her visions with others, but she was offered up as an oblate to a Benedictine monastery as a young child by her parents. In the Middle Ages, monastic living was hugely common, and it was very normal for wealthy families like Hildegard's to offer their younger children up for monastic life for either financial or political reasons. Oblates, unlike monks and nuns, are still technically lay people and can often leave monastic living if they so choose. But ultimately, Hildegard would remain affiliated with the Benedictines for the rest of her life, taking up formal monastic vows at the age of 14. During her time with the Benedictines, Hildegard would produce an extensive body of work on a wide range of subjects. This included 3 volumes where she transcribed her visions and analyzed them theologically. But not all of her religious writings were straightforward theology. She is also credited with writing what would now be considered the first morality play, Ordo Virtutum, in 1151. The play functions as a kind of dramatized struggle between the personified human soul, several saintly virtues, and the devil, and it exists in 2 versions, one with music and one without, making it a kind of early opera or stage musical. It predates other similar plays like this by over a century. And this brings us to what Hildegard is probably best known for nowadays, which is her music. For Hildegard, her musical career was directly intertwined with her religious life, and this is partly because she saw music as a way to unlock a kind of altered state of consciousness, something that contemporary neurologists would call dianesthesia. This is a state of consciousness between being fully awake and fully asleep, and is similar to hypnosis or potentially mystical experience. And this might be why she wrote so much music. Ordo Virtuosum on its own features 82 original songs, and we also have 69 other complete musical works attributed to her, as well as 4 more whose lyrics survive, but whose musical notation has unfortunately been lost. This makes her not just one of the best documented composers of the Middle Ages, but also one of the most prolific. And in addition to writing a ton of music, her music was also pretty unique. It was written in the plain chant style that was really common in liturgical music of the period, but is said to be more dramatic and expressive than other types of music that were common at the time, like Gregorian chant, which I think most of us would be more familiar with. I'm gonna play a little snippet of it just so you can get a taste of the incredible music that she was making. Like most thinkers of the Middle Ages, Hildegard wrote everything in Latin. But in addition to the Latin she wrote in and her native language of German, she also invented her own language called lingua ignota, or unknown language. This language consisted of a vocabulary of around 1,000 nouns, but no other parts of speech. And it had its own alphabet, called literae ignotae, or alternate lettering. We don't entirely know what she used this for. It's theorized she might have used it as kind of a secret code to communicate with her nuns, or maybe she was working on a new language that could be used by scholars. But either way, it is absolutely fascinating. And as if she wasn't already busy enough, Hildegard was also something of a proto-scientist. For most of human history, science was not its own separate discipline, and was typically considered to be under the general umbrella of philosophy, often called natural philosophy. And since Hildegard wrote about philosophy, it makes sense that she wrote about science too. She wrote 2 primary scientific texts. The first, Physica, is a kind of medical encyclopedia detailing the benefits of different natural substances, namely foods and minerals, as well as Causae et Curae, which literally translates to causes and cures, and is kind of a health manual on the causes and cures behind various ailments. Most of Hildegard's recommendations would fall under what we would now consider to be holistic or complementary medicine. She saw the natural world, and particularly our diets, as having a direct impact on our health. So, as you might imagine, she had some pretty interesting opinions about food. One of the foods she was most interested in was spelt, which was kind of a cousin to wheat, and was much more nutritionally complex and higher in protein than common wheat, which is what most of us eat today. She also had several foods that she was distinctly not fond of, namely strawberries, which breaks my heart because they are one of my absolute favorite foods. We do actually have some surviving recipes from Hildegard, and surprise, surprise, almost all of them include spelt. We're going to be making one of them here today, Hildegardplätzchen, or Saint Hildegard's spice cookies. As we just talked about, Hildegard saw our diets as having a huge impact on our health, and these cookies in particular are meant to improve your mental health. Hildegard thought that spices could make you happy, and these cookies are chock full of them. So join me as we make Saint Hildegard's saintly spice cookies. To make Hildegardplätzchen, you will need half a stick of butter and 3/4 cups of sugar. You can use either white or brown sugar here, but I'm a big brown sugar fan, so I will be using that. You will also need 2 eggs and 3½ cups of flour. For maximum authenticity, Hildegard would probably have used spelt flour, but I am using all-purpose here, and you can do the same or mix the two. You will also need a teaspoon of baking powder, 2 teaspoons each of nutmeg and cinnamon, and half a teaspoon of cloves. To start, cream together your butter and sugar with a spatula. Once your butter and sugar are combined, beat your eggs into the mixture. In a separate bowl, combine your flour, baking powder, and spices. With your dry ingredients combined, gradually add them to your wet ingredients until a soft dough begins to form. Feel free to add some water if you think your dough is getting too dry. With your dough ready, mold it into a ball and then flatten it into a round disc. Using a rolling pin, roll out your dough until it is about a 1/4 inch thick. Next, take a cookie cutter and cut out your cookies. The recipe I am using recommends cutting them into circles about 3 inches in diameter. Line your cookies on a baking sheet and bake for 12 to 15 minutes at 350 degrees until golden brown. If you'd like to learn more about Hildegard von Bingen, then I would strongly recommend the novel Illuminations by Mary Sherratt. Illuminations is a historical fiction novel based on the life of Hildegard von Bingen. It is a complex, empathetic portrait of a very, very fascinating woman told in a really approachable style. You can check out Illuminations from the Harris County Public Library. Thank you for watching this episode of Baking is Making. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter so that you never miss a future episode of Baking is Making or any of our other great online programs. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!